The market square of Eldoria's capital was alive with chaos, yet beneath the hum of haggling merchants and the metallic clatter of carts over cobblestones, a small, shivering figure caught my eye. At first glance, I thought it was a lost child, weaving between crates of molten glass, brass gears, and painted ceramics, but then sunlight glinted off something impossible. Golden scales, gleaming even in the dusty morning air. My breath caught. A baby dragon, no larger than a fat house cat, crouched among the market debris, trembling violently. Smoke twirled gently from its tiny nostrils, and its chest rose and fell in ragged, nervous breaths. Clutched in its delicate claws was a broken toy, a miniature clockwork knight, its lance bent, one arm missing, and cogs rattling hopelessly inside the hollow chest. The dragon's eyes met mine. Large amber orbs shimmering with tears and something I could only describe as a pleading intelligence. It extended the toy toward me with a slight, trembling movement, as if it were offering its trust on loan until I repaired the damage. The crowd around us continued their business, oblivious. Dragons were rare in the capital, and even rarer to see wandering so young and unprotected. Merchants muttered nervously, some crossing themselves, others stepping back. But I was rooted to the spot, compelled by a force I couldn't name. Kneeling carefully on the uneven cobblestones, I tried to calm the small creature, speaking softly even though it couldn't understand my words. "Don't worry," I murmured. "I'll fix it." My hands went to my repair bag, the same one I carried for odd jobs. Tiny wrenches, miniature files, and scraps of clockwork, all accumulated over years of tinkering in my small workshop at the edge of the city. I placed the toy on a clean patch of cloth I spread on the ground, examining the damage more closely. A snapped axle, misaligned gears, and a miniature spring barely hanging on by a thread. I set to work immediately, twisting the tiny gears back into place, carefully sanding jagged edges, and replacing the axle with one salvaged from a discarded automaton that had once been a display in a traveling fair. Each adjustment was deliberate. I could see the dragon watching, head tilting slightly, wings twitching nervously as if its tiny body could not contain the tension. Its tail curled around the crate behind it, a protective coil that made it seem both vulnerable and defiant at the same time. Every time a cog clicked into place, I felt a little thrill, not unlike triumph, but tempered with worry. The hatchling, small as it was a living creature with instincts that could make it unpredictable. I had no idea if it would be grateful, frightened, or aggressive once I finished. Hours seemed to stretch into minutes as I worked. Around us, the market carried on. Merchants shouted their wares, the clatter of hoofed carts echoed, and the smell of roasting nuts and fresh bread mingled with the faint tang of metal and oil from nearby workshops. Yet my focus never wavered from the task. I could feel the dragon's emotions like a faint vibration in the air, a subtle pressure that tugged at my nerves. When I finally clicked the last gear into place and aligned the miniature lance so it stood straight, I extended it toward the hatchling. For a heartbeat, it did not move, trembling as though unsure whether to trust that the human before it had not finished some cruel trick. Then, as if understanding that the toy was whole again, the hatchling emitted a high-pitched trill, a sound that reminded me strangely of laughter, and nuzzled the repaired knight to its chest. Its wings flared briefly, sending tiny sparks of static from the tips into the air, and the expression in its glowing eyes was pure relief. I exhaled, letting myself smile, though I remained aware of the curious eyes that now watched from a distance. I hadn't noticed the shadow above the balcony of a nearby palace wing, a subtle movement at first, almost blending with the carved stone. A pair of eyes, sharp and calculating, had followed every moment. My hesitation when I first approached, my careful movements as I disassembled the toy, and the instinctive gentleness I used in handling the fragile dragon. The observer did not blink, their attention fixed entirely on me. The crown's eyes, unrecognized in the moment, were watching. What they were evaluating, I did not know, skill, patience, bravery, or something else, but I could feel their silent presence, as though the walls themselves held judgment. Beneath me, the hatchling curled its tail around my wrist as I handed the toy back. It squeaked, then clutched it to its chest, wings fluttering with satisfaction. I realized that in this small act, repairing a child's toy, or in this case a dragon's, I had connected with something far beyond simple mechanics. I felt an energy pass through me, subtle at first, almost like static electricity but warmer. When I looked at my hand, I noticed faint, glowing lines across my palm and forearm. The sigil was forming slowly, intricate and winding, tracing shapes like tiny wings around a central ember-shaped glyph. My heart skipped a beat. The old stories came to mind. Tales told by elders of the Emberbound, humans who had earned the trust of dragons so fully that their lives became intertwined with theirs, marked forever by a mysterious sigil that appeared on their skin. It was said that the mark could grant heightened perception, resilience to flame, even an intuitive connection to a dragon's thoughts and feelings. I stared at my arm in disbelief, tracing the glowing lines with my fingers, and realized that somehow, in this quiet alley among the market chaos, I had been chosen. The hatchling nuzzled closer, resting its tiny snout against my arm, and warmth surged through me. Not burning, but harmonizing, resonating with the glow of the sigil. From above, the palace balcony remained silent. The observer had not shifted, not smiled, not moved, but their presence was undeniable. Whatever was about to happen next, it was already set in motion. I had no idea what kind of attention the crown might bring, nor the consequences of bearing this mark, but I could feel the responsibility settle across my shoulders. It was heavy, but not unwelcome. The hatchling chirped again, looking at me with eyes full of trust, and I knew that no amount of fear, no amount of uncertainty, could make me abandon it. The market continued to bustle, oblivious to the extraordinary moment unfolding in their midst. Merchants hawked their goods, carts rattled over cobblestones, and the smell of roasting meats and spices hung in the air. Yet for me, all of that faded into insignificance. My hands were still slightly soiled from tools. The repaired toy gleamed in the dragon's claws, and my arm glowed with the dragon mark. A mark I barely understood, but already felt coursing with purpose. Beneath it all, a silent understanding passed between the tiny dragon and me. We had saved each other in some way, even if neither of us fully comprehended how. By the time the sun rose higher, bathing the market in golden light, I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. The royal eyes had not left. They had seen the careful repair, the instinctive care, the bond that formed in silence. Somehow, in those moments, my life had changed forever. I had saved a dragon hatchling's toy, but unknowingly, I had also captured the attention of the most powerful figures in Eldoria. The dragon mark burned faintly, a reminder that I was no longer merely a mechanic. I was part of something far greater, something ancient and powerful. And as I watched the hatchling flutter its tiny wings in delight, I knew that the eyes watching from above were not the only ones assessing me. In that moment, in the quiet heartbeat between chaos and calm, a story began, one of trust, courage, and bonds that could not be broken. I did not yet know what the future held, but one thing was certain. From this small act of kindness, my life would never be the same, and neither would the fate of the little dragon who had given me its trust. By the time the sun rose fully over Eldoria's capital, the market square was alive with the ordinary bustle of merchants arranging wares and children darting between stalls. Yet in one corner, I still knelt beside the tiny dragon. Its chest rose and fell steadily now, but the slight tremor in its wings betrayed lingering pain. The repaired clockwork knight lay at my feet, its miniature armor gleaming faintly in the morning light, and the hatchling's amber eyes never left me, following every motion as though it were learning, assessing, and deciding whether trust could endure. Around us, passers-by moved without noticing the extraordinary, a reminder that miracles often go unrecognized in the face of mundane routine. I lifted the hatchling gently into my arms, careful to support the fragile wing that still flexed weakly. Its warmth pressed into me, a tiny pulse of living fire, and I realized that the dragon mark on my forearm had brightened subtly when I touched it. I flexed my fingers, marveling at the way the glowing sigil seemed to respond to proximity, almost as if it recognized the creature I now held. A shiver ran down my spine, not from fear but from awareness. This bond was more than symbolic. It carried a resonance I could feel in every nerve. The marketplace was no place for a dragon, even a tiny one, and I knew it. Merchants would panic, authorities would intervene, and rumors would spread faster than fire. But I couldn't leave the hatchling exposed. I glanced toward the narrow alley that led behind the market stalls and decided that my workshop, though cramped and cluttered, would provide a safer sanctuary. Its walls were lined with tools, spare parts, and half-finished automatons, offering both cover and resources. With careful steps, I carried the hatchling through the crowded streets, ducking under awnings and avoiding the attention of curious onlookers, whose eyes lingered just long enough to sense that something unusual moved past. Halfway to my workshop, a soft, almost imperceptible hum echoed through the air. I froze, scanning the rooftops. From the balcony of a nearby palace wing, a figure cloaked in deep blue observed us. The silhouette was still, posture rigid, but the presence was undeniable. I felt a subtle pressure in the back of my mind, a sense that we were being watched, assessed not by curiosity but by purpose. The royal eyes had not blinked since the first moment I had bent over the toy, and now their gaze followed us through the streets. A part of me wanted to glance up and meet them, but instinct told me to keep moving, to focus on the hatchling and the task ahead. When we reached the workshop, I secured the door behind us and set the dragon gently on the workbench. It sniffed the air, nostrils curling, then chirped softly as if acknowledging our new surroundings. I ran my fingers over the patched-up wing again, testing its strength. The dragon mark pulsed faintly at my touch, its warmth spreading along my forearm like a current. I realized I could sense the hatchling's tiny movements, the subtle twitch of muscles, the faintest rhythm of its heartbeat. The connection was no longer passive. It was active, immediate, and undeniable. Hours passed as I tended to the hatchling, offering water in a shallow dish and placing soft cloths beneath its claws for comfort. The dragon responded cautiously at first, but gradually it relaxed, nuzzling the edge of the workbench and curling its tail around my wrist. With every small interaction, the glow of the dragon mark shifted, sometimes brightening, sometimes dimming, but always present, a constant reminder that the bond between us had deepened. Outside, the city moved on unaware, but the palace observer remained. From time to time, a soft shadow flickered across the window, a subtle signal that the crown's attention had not wavered. They had witnessed my care, my patience, and perhaps even the instinctive understanding that a small creature's life could be preserved by more than skill. It required empathy, courage, and a willingness to accept responsibility. I had acted without thought of reward or recognition, yet the unseen royal presence made it clear that deeds born of instinct were rarely unnoticed by those who ruled. As afternoon faded, a faint noise from the street below drew my attention. I peered through the window and saw merchants and children gathering in small clusters, their gazes drawn upward to the balcony of the palace wing. A hush fell over the crowd, broken only by the soft coo of the city pigeons taking flight. The royal figure had emerged, their posture formal yet commanding, observing the streets with quiet authority. I felt a pang of apprehension, realizing that whatever judgment awaited me would be delivered not in private, but in the open, witnessed by the city itself. The hatchling stirred, sensing my tension. It chirped softly, wings fluttering, and I instinctively spoke to it, murmuring reassurance in tones it could somehow understand. The mark responded, a gentle warmth spreading across my skin, calming both of us. For the first time, I felt a measure of clarity. The bond was protective, not just symbolic. The hatchling's trust had awakened something within me, and in return, the dragon mark had granted me awareness, attunement, and a measure of strength I had never known. Evening fell, and the city lights flickered on, casting golden reflections on the cobblestones below. I sat on the edge of the workbench, the hatchling nestled against my chest, its tiny heart beating in time with my own. Somewhere above, unseen eyes continued to watch, and I realized that the choices I made in the next hours could shape not only the life of this small dragon but also my own fate. I had repaired a toy, yes, but in doing so, I had set in motion forces beyond my understanding. Forces that could alter the balance between human and dragon, commoner and crown. And as the last light of day slipped behind the rooftops, I understood that this was only the beginning. The bond had been forged, the mark had awakened, and the hatchling's eyes held a question I could not yet answer. Who would I become in a world where the smallest act of care could draw the gaze of kings and change history forever? Morning broke over Eldoria with the same clamor as before, but I no longer felt like a mere observer of the city. The hatchling rested against my chest, its warmth radiating through the dragon mark that glowed faintly across my forearm. Every subtle movement it made, flinching, tail twitching, or a small hiss, sent ripples through the sigil, a pulse of awareness that bound our senses together. I could feel its fear, its curiosity, even its excitement as we prepared to leave the safety of my workshop and navigate the city streets toward a quieter place where we might consider our next steps. The world outside the small room was indifferent to the extraordinary moment forming within it, yet I could not ignore the weight of what had occurred. As I stepped into the street with the hatchling cradled carefully, the golden scales of the creature glinting in the morning sun, I felt the hum of observation again. The palace balcony above remained silent, but the royal eyes had not moved. The presence was palpable, a constant pressure in my mind, a reminder that my actions were being measured not just for skill, but for character, instinct, and courage. The dragon mark pulsed in response, as if acknowledging the scrutiny and warning me that the stakes were higher than mere survival of a broken toy. We moved cautiously through the bustling market, weaving around carts stacked with pottery and piles of fresh bread, the hatchling's small claws occasionally grazing my arm as if seeking reassurance. Its eyes followed every passerby, flicking nervously when someone came too close. I kept my voice low, murmuring to it, not expecting comprehension but hoping my tone would calm its racing heart. The glow from the dragon mark responded, warmer, steadier, a subtle reassurance that the connection between us was strengthening with every step. Around us, the city seemed to hold its breath, unaware of the significance of what walked among them. People glanced at the shimmering scales and assumed it was a rare exotic creature, perhaps a trained display animal, nothing more. But to me, every featherlight step the hatchling took felt like a gamble. A single misstep or sudden movement could draw unwanted attention, and in Eldoria, attention from the wrong people could be dangerous. I could feel that instinctively through the mark. The hatchling sensed it too, pressing closer into my chest, small flames sputtering faintly from its nostrils as if it were testing the boundaries of control. Halfway to a quieter street that ran along the edge of the city walls, a patrol of city guards emerged from the alleys. Their eyes widened when they saw the golden scales, the tiny wings, the tears still clinging to the hatchling's eyes, and immediately, their hands went to the hilts of their spears. I froze, feeling the tension spike through the mark as the hatchling's chest heaved. I raised a hand instinctively, palm open, not as a threat but as a signal. The glow of the dragon mark flared suddenly, brighter than it had ever been, and the hatchling responded, pressing itself against me and curling its wings around its body in a protective gesture. The patrol halted, unsure of how to react. They had been trained to confront danger, to subdue animals and humans alike, but the synchronized pulsing of the sigil and the hatchling's movements created an aura that was at once calming and commanding. I realized then that the bond between us was more than awareness, it was influence. I could sense the hesitations in their minds, their doubts, their instinctive assessments, and I adjusted my stance, speaking softly. "We mean no harm. Please, just allow us to pass." My words might have been meaningless to them, but the combination of the mark's presence and the hatchling's trust seemed to communicate intent beyond language. Finally, the guards lowered their weapons slightly, exchanging uncertain glances, before stepping aside to let us pass. Relief washed over me, though I remained vigilant. The city streets stretched ahead, full of unknown observers and potential threats, yet I felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on my shoulders. The dragon mark pulsed steadily now, a rhythm that mirrored both my heartbeat and the hatchling's, and for the first time, I understood that this connection was a partnership, not merely a burden. We reached a secluded courtyard near the city's eastern walls, where sunlight poured through open archways and the sound of the city seemed distant, muffled by stone. Here, I placed the hatchling gently on a raised platform, letting it stretch its wings for the first time in hours. Its small limbs moved tentatively, testing strength, while I observed the repairs to the toy, ensuring every gear clicked correctly, every hinge was secure. The hatchling chirped happily, a sound that seemed to vibrate directly into my chest, and the dragon mark pulsed brighter, its light warm and affirming. Then, a sudden shadow fell over us. My eyes snapped upward to see the royal figure, still observing, stepping onto the balcony and moving closer to the railing. Their presence radiated authority and awareness. It was clear they had been tracking us from the moment I first repaired the toy. The hatchling froze, sensing the gaze, and I instinctively stepped protectively forward, hand glowing with the sigil's warmth. The mark pulsed with urgency, connecting our attention to the royal observer, and I felt a silent dialogue begin. Not with words, but with awareness and intent. The figure nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if acknowledging the bond between human and dragon. The gesture was fleeting, yet profound. It confirmed something I had only begun to understand. Our actions, our care, our courage, had meaning far beyond this courtyard. What I had thought was a small act of kindness, repairing a toy, had demonstrated skill, patience, and instinctive empathy, and the royal eyes had recognized it. The hatchling chirped again, tentative at first, then with confidence and pressed closer to me. The dragon mark flared once more, warming my skin and radiating outward in a gentle pulse. For a moment, everything was still. The city distant, the guards forgotten, the palace observer watching silently. It was just the three of us, human, hatchling, and the connection that bound us together. And in that quiet, suspended moment, I realized something undeniable. The mark was not just a symbol. It was a responsibility, a bond that demanded care, courage, and vigilance. The hatchling trusted me entirely, and in turn, I had to trust the bond, trust the instincts it awakened, and trust that the unseen eyes above would judge not with punishment, but with consideration. The sun began to dip behind the city walls, casting long shadows across the courtyard. I cradled the hatchling gently, feeling its warmth, and allowed myself a brief moment of wonder. A broken toy had led to this, a single act of repair and instinctive choice to protect, and now the attention of a crown. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The bond one shared with the hatchling and the dragon mark had irrevocably changed the path of both our lives. From here on, every choice, every step would matter, and the city, the crown, and perhaps the world would be watching. Twilight fell over Eldoria, painting the city in muted shades of gold and violet. Yet the quiet beauty of evening did little to soothe my nerves. The hatchling rested against my shoulder, its small wings folding tightly against its sides, and the dragon mark pulsed faintly along my forearm, a steady reminder of the bond between us. Every twitch of its tail, every subtle flutter of its wings, sent ripples through the sigil, and I could feel the hatchling's emotions. Its relief, its lingering fear, and its cautious curiosity, all mingling with my own. We were no longer merely a human and a creature in need. We were a pair bound by something ancient, something that had chosen us both. The royal observer, the one who had been watching from the palace balcony since the morning, finally made their presence unmistakable. A figure stepped from the shadows of the archway into the courtyard, cloak swaying lightly, and their gaze fixed firmly on the hatchling and me. The glow of the dragon mark intensified as if reacting to the proximity, warming my skin and tightening the connection I felt to the small dragon. I held the hatchling a little closer, protective instinct flaring in tandem with the sigil, aware that this meeting was no longer casual observation. It was judgment. "Step forward," a calm, commanding voice said from above. I hesitated, glancing at the hatchling, who chirped softly in encouragement. The creature trusted me. I had earned that trust. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the open courtyard, letting the warm glow of the mark light my path. The royal figure descended the steps slowly, deliberately, their eyes never leaving the hatchling. I could feel the weight of history in their gaze, as though generations of dragons and humans had waited to see this moment unfold. "You have handled the hatchling with care," the figure said, voice measured, almost neutral, yet carrying the authority of the crown. Few humans would take responsibility for a dragon, even one so small, without fear or hesitation. I bowed my head slightly, the hatchling nuzzling my neck as I did. "I did what I could," I admitted. "I couldn't leave it there. It needed help." The figure's eyes softened, though only slightly. "You understand that this is no ordinary creature. The hatchling belongs to the Embercrest lineage. Its survival is of great importance, not just to the dragons of Eldoria, but to the balance of our city." I blinked, taking in the weight of their words. The hatchling stirred against me, and I could feel a subtle tension through the mark, the knowledge that its life was not merely important, but significant on a scale far beyond my understanding. "You bear the dragon mark," the figure continued, gesturing to the sigil glowing across my forearm. "Few are chosen. It is a bond that demands more than skill. It demands understanding, courage, and unwavering commitment." The mark pulsed in response, warmer now, and I felt a deep resonance between my heartbeat and the hatchling's, as if the crown's acknowledgement had validated the connection. I swallowed hard, aware of the implications. The hatchling's lineage, the mark, the attention of the crown. All of it indicated that my life was no longer my own. I was bound to this creature in ways I had not fully comprehended, and every decision I made from this point forward would have consequences far beyond repair work and quiet acts of kindness. The figure stepped closer, and the hatchling chirped sharply, wings flaring defensively, though it did not leave my side. I could feel its instincts, amplified by the mark, reacting to the presence of the royal figure. "It trusts you," the figure said, voice softer now. "The bond you share is rare. You have proven that even a small act, repairing a toy, can reveal the character of a person. That is why you were marked." A wave of realization swept over me. All those years I had tinkered with tools and parts, helping machines function, never imagining that the same instincts, patience, and care could extend to a living, breathing creature, much less one that carried the weight of a royal lineage. The hatchling chirped again, nudging my hand with the toy it had carried since morning. The dragon mark pulsed, warm and steady, and I understood in that moment that our bond was not merely symbolic. It was active, a shared awareness that connected our senses, emotions, and, in some subtle way, our decisions. "You will need to continue guiding it," the figure said, stepping back to observe. "The hatchling's safety is paramount. Many would see it as a plaything or an opportunity. You must ensure its well-being, and in doing so, you will prove worthy of the dragon mark. The eyes of the crown, and of the Embercrest lineage, are upon you." I nodded, my chest tight with responsibility, yet bolstered by the trust one felt from the hatchling. It chirped softly again, tiny claws pressing gently against my shoulder. The mark glowed in rhythm with its heartbeat, and I realized that our bond had grown beyond instinctual connection. It was now a partnership, mutual and unbreakable. I was not just a mechanic. I was a guardian, a protector, and a participant in a history that stretched far beyond my previous understanding of the city, dragons, and even my own place in the world. As the royal figure turned to leave, they paused, looking back once more. "Remember this," they said. "Your actions will ripple outward. One small choice can alter destiny. Protect the hatchling, honor the bond, and the dragon mark will guide you in ways you cannot yet imagine." When they disappeared into the shadows, the hatchling chirped again, wings fluttering in excitement, and I felt the pulse of the mark warm my skin like a steady heartbeat. We were alone, yet the bond had been acknowledged, legitimized, and our future set into motion. I held the hatchling closer, knowing that the path ahead would demand courage, vigilance, and unwavering care. Night fell, and the city lights glimmered against the darkening sky. From my workshop balcony, I watched the streets below, the hatchling perched on my shoulder, toy in claw. The dragon mark pulsed warmly, steady and strong. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of purpose. What began as a simple act of repair had grown into a responsibility that would define my life, entwining me with the fate of the hatchling, the Embercrest lineage, and perhaps the very balance of Eldoria itself. And as the stars emerged above, I whispered softly to the hatchling, "We'll face this together. No matter what comes, we'll stand side by side." The creature chirped, resting its head against my chest, and the mark pulsed once more, affirming the silent promise we shared. A bond forged in trust, courage, and care, destined to shape the future of dragons and humans alike.